I'm actually surprised that Lee has been able to say what he said, and it to come across as so confused, because the England media people, anybody at talkSPORT, anybody at the other radio stations, television stations, will tell you that Andy Walker, who's the head of comms at the FA, particularly England men's national team, he's excellent. I remember before we went off to World Cups, whether it be South Africa or Brazil, players put in the gym at St George's Park, and anybody and everybody was allowed to go over and ask them questions, because they were trusted to. And if people started to play around and ask sort of dodgy questions that had nothing to do with the sport, then they weren't invited again. And I just think that when Lee took the job, I think that there just should have been 2 or 3 things. If you're asked the question, do you want the job? I'd love the job, but I'm concentrating on the job in hand. That's it. I'm not answering any more questions. Likewise, going all the way back to the very first the game against the Republic of Ireland. I played for the Republic of Ireland. I was very proud to play for them. There's another Englishman that he managed the Republic of Ireland and he won a World Cup. Just lighten things, Jack Charlton, of course, lighten things up. And I think that Lee, unfortunately, like a lot of coaches that come from within, whether it be the Spanish system, the French system at Clairefontaine, or the English system, they're very much robotic in the way that they come across, because they do have media training, but in large part, they weren't the big names as players that were prepared for 5 or 6 different angles of questioning that you can then answer. So I just don't think he's going to get the job. I think that the 2 performances have been, the first one was poor, second one was okay. But in terms of the communication, the English football fan, the hardcore, and then the nation, when we get to tournaments, are going to want somebody that talks from their telly, from their radio, straight to them. And Lee doesn't do that.
No, it's true. What do you make of Stuart Pearce's comments that he didn't feel some of the players were really putting it in, that there was a sort of lack of commitment?
Well, we're more thinking about the weekend for their clubs, yeah?
I mean, obviously, I played with the skipper for 2 years at Forest and had 2 very successful years, and he's not backwards in coming forwards. He's also very kind often with his comments. He doesn't weigh into people as much as you'd imagine Stuart Pearce too, when he does his comms, for example. So I think that he's looked at the performance and looked at the players and said, okay, where are we in the season? Going back to Premier League games, some players have been taken out of their squads because let's be perfectly honest, and we've got to address it at some point, there are too many games being played in football across too many tournaments. I would be inclined to agree with the sort of, are we going to put ourselves completely out there for 2 Nations League games? I think that's a problem with the tournament generally. It was very interesting. Again, you can usually get the answers by the way that players are briefed and the briefing topics that are talked to in pre-match pressers. Mark Gray came out and said, we're here. It's been really tough. It's a really good camp and we're all motivated to play. And I'm a player, and players are often fed lines to give to the media to effectively bat off those kind of questions. Harry Kane, in his post-match comments, said, it's been a tough 2 games. There weren't any mugs, Finland, etc., etc. So that would allude to what Stuart was saying. A lot of people were saying was that, have we taken this camp not seriously enough? And let's be perfectly honest, we want to get out of this Group B, because if we're going to get what I said after the Greece game, we're going to need to be playing Italy, Germany, France, Spain regularly on a loop if we're going to be beating them in quarterfinals, semi-finals and finals. And with the greatest respect to Greece, Finland, Republic of Ireland, other teams, Georgia in the same group, we're not going to be doing that by playing these teams on a regular basis.
So who next then? You start to think about it. I'm looking at the Paddy Power odds. Took all his odds on, but I think that does seem unlikely. Then you've got Carsley at 4-1, Pep at 6-1. I mean, that's such a flyer. Then Graham Potter, who is available and won't cost any compensation.
He also is not great with the media, though. I think obviously he's a good coach, but, it's the same problem with him. You saw him on Monday Night Football. It's just not his strong point,
Yeah. Eddie Howe, I think, is a favourite of a lot of people. I saw Michael Dawson on Sky earlier on talking him up. Then there's a massive drop-off on the odds into Frank Lampard and Gary O'Neill and Steven Gerrard, etc., etc. I mean, do you have anybody and realistically, you'd like to see do it then?
Well, in terms of coaching, you're looking at Howe and Potter. if you want to maintain the sort of English sort of theme of St George's Park over recent years. But Graham Potter, as Andy said, he's not a great talker. He wasn't a great talker at Chelsea. It was exactly the same problem that effectively talked him out of the Chelsea job as arguably Lee Carsley. Thomas Tuchel, I'm just getting a feeling, I don't know what you and the two of you think, is that he's available and he's a big name. I'm not quite sure how he'd fit in with the FA system, if I'm being perfectly honest. So that would cost a lot of money as well. I would imagine Graham Potter wouldn't be cheap either. Frank Lampard might be an interesting one. Why? Instant name recognition, did well for the most part for his country, has managed in the Premier League, has managed at Derby County in the Championship, so you can wrap around him did the hard yards, and he's an exceptional talker. And he would get the kind of nodding people at home like us if we came out with performances like Greece and to a lesser extent Finland, certainly the Greece performance. And he could paint that in a way where we would go, okay, we're going to give him more time because we trust him. And I think that then Frank could get other coaches around him. Then you're starting, of course, to look at round pegs in round holes. Ashley Cole, of course, has worked with him, played with him. You're looking at other potential young coaches that would be delighted to be able to work with him. And I wonder whether you would be able to, and this is just sort of off the top of my head, you know, the Wayne Rooneys, the Gerrards, whether they would be invited into camps in the same way that Chris Powell and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank has, not on a permanent basis, but just to give some sort of presence. The answer is Eddie Howe or Graham Potter, but I don't think Eddie Howe is going to leave a lucrative day in, day out Premier League job. And I don't think Graham Potter will be any further along the line from a lot of England fans as to what the problems with Gareth Southgate and particularly Lee Carsley have, that they are perceived as FA yes men. We want somebody with his own personality, his own character, his own coaching philosophy and structure. So now it's a two-way street. Do the FA turn left and go internal? I think that's a bit of a problem now with Lee Carsley. Or do they go right, back down the Sven days, whereby we're going to pay, Fabio Capello days, we're going to pay top dollar for the best available guy, and then you're starting to look at Thomas Tuchel. But I wouldn't rule out Frank Lampard at this point.
And just finally, do you think? Yeah, do you think in the next month, Stan, the FA will kind of let it be known that they are casting their net a little bit wider? They've been very quiet about it at the moment, so there is a feeling they're not doing anything.
It's because they want to give Carsley, it's the cheapest and easiest option.
But I think that's become very difficult in the last week, hasn't it?
Yeah, they've got to now, because we might get dragged into a situation whereby we're playing in March, which I don't think would actually be the worst thing with Nations League playoffs, etc. But if not, then you're looking at next September, the next England game, and that's a hell of a long time. And a really good opportunity for somebody to get their feet under the table, understand the system, be seen and photographed at St George's Park, be seen and photographed at Wembley, be at dozens of Premier League games, and for you to be able to turn around and say, crikey, this guy's done the hard, you know, he's up for the job, isn't he? He's been seen here, there and everywhere. So there's a lot of time before the World Cup qualifiers of this time next year to choose the right man, but most importantly, choose the right man fairly quickly so he can have a real head of steam leading up to those very, very World Cup qualifiers, which are going to take us, of course, to an expanded World Cup across Canada, Mexico and the United States. So sooner rather than later. But I think that, to be perfectly honest, I think that the Lee Carsley experiment has failed, and now they need to get 4 or 5 names crystallised, and the FA need to come out, Paul and Andy, as you've just suggested, and to say, we're hoping to get this done by Christmas, or we're hoping to get this done by January, February. We may play in March, but if not, it gives 8 or 9 months for the new guy to get into the FA system before the World Cup qualifiers come autumn.
Cheers, Stan. We'll catch up with you Friday.
See you later. Have a good week.
Yeah, there's Stan Collymore there with his take on England and the managerial situation. So let's work on the basis then. It's unlikely to be Thomas Tuchel, and it's unlikely to be Pep. So it probably could be Eddie Howe, maybe, if he could be cut. And, you know, the England job is such a pull when England come calling.
It is. The longer they leave it, though, in one sense, the better it is. Because, for example, if it went wrong, it's not going to be. If the City Charges case went wrong, that would mean Pep was available.
Yeah, but you can't hang on until... I mean, whatever happens, it will be towards the end of the season that we'll know what's going on with Manchester City. Then there'll be an appeal. So it could be into the following season. England will be about 5 or 6 games into World Cup qualifying. You can't take that risk. You can't just hang on the basis that it might do you a favour. And it could go completely the other way, couldn't it? So
it's not an easy situation, really.
I mean, Frank Lampard is an interesting one. But interesting to hear from you. If the realistic option was Frank Lampard or Graham Potter, who are you going for?
Did well at Derby, did well at Chelsea in the first season when we had the transfer ban. Then it went wrong, but the team was good. Tuchel came in. He's
also medals on the table. You'll get respect.
But when
he
came back, it was a disaster. But then, I think anybody.
I mean, you're pretty well placed to talk about what he was like as a manager. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. He was, the first time around, I was really impressed. When we had the young team with no, they couldn't make any transfers.
Paul Hawksbee and Andy Jacobs, Monday to Friday afternoons 1 till 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.